Hello everyone, my name is Tanushree Lad. I am the Assistant Professor of AISSMS College of Hotel Management and Catering Technology, Pune. Today, I will be conducting part 2 of Mitigation and Adaptation Strategies, Renewable Energy and Carbon Footprint Reduction. Now, before I go ahead with this session, let us do a quick recap of what was discussed in the last session. In the last session, we discussed climate change briefly. We learned about what carbon footprint reduction is, and also discussed about renewable energy. Now that we've done the recap of the last session, let us move ahead with this session. So what will we be doing in this session? In this session, we will understand the term mitigation and its role in climate change, and we will move forward and also learn about what adaptation strategies should be adopted to curb the negative side effects of climate change. Shall we begin? Let us begin with mitigation. Now, mitigation is essentially the process or result of making something less severe, dangerous, painful, harsh, or damaging. In other words, it talks about actions that reduce the effects of humans on the climate. Mitigation in climate change refers to actions and strategies aimed at reducing or preventing the emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, thereby mitigating the effects of climate change. These actions are essential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, slowing the rate of climate change, and minimizing any adverse impact on ecosystems, economies, and community. So to keep ecosystems healthy in the future, we need to use both adaptation, which is essentially adjusting to changes, and mitigation, which is reducing human impact. The vast majority of mitigation strategies involve actions that lessen climate change effects either by cutting down on greenhouse gas emissions or storing carbon. They aim to lessen environmental changes caused by human activities like using green energy and sustainable building materials. So what are the mitigation strategies? Here we will be discussing 4 mitigation strategies. The first one is improving energy efficiency and adopting renewable energy. The second one is promoting sustainable mobility. The third one is promoting ecological practices in industry and agriculture. And finally, taxing fossil fuels and implementing carbon markets. So let's move ahead and discuss the first point, which is improving energy efficiency and adopting renewable energy. What does this mean? Now, this involves reducing energy consumption through efficient technologies and practices while transitioning to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, which produces fewer greenhouse gases than fossil fuels. Now, what is improving energy efficiency? This involves using energy more efficiently to accomplish the same tasks, such as upgrading appliances, improving insulation, and implementing energy-saving technologies. By reducing energy waste, we can decrease greenhouse gas emissions and lower energy costs. What is adopting renewable energy? Renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydroelectric power generate electricity without producing harmful emissions. By transitioning to renewable energy, we can reduce reliance on fossil fuels. We can mitigate climate change, or rather reduce climate change, and promote environmental sustainability. The second point, which is promoting sustainable mobility. What exactly is promoting sustainable mobility? It means promoting public transport and sustainable mobility by increasing the number of journeys in towns by bicycle, reducing the number of flights, and taking more trips by train or in shared cars. Sustainable mobility talks about promoting shared travel either by train or car, and also includes the promotion of electric vehicles. Now, why electric vehicles? Transitioning to electric vehicles offers a cleaner alternative to traditional internal combustion engine, which reduces emissions from the transportation sector. Moving on to the third point, which talks about promoting ecological practices in industry and agriculture. Promoting ecological practices talks about ecological industry, agriculture, fishing and livestock farming. It talks about food sustainability, responsible consumption, and of course the 3 R's. What are the 3 R's? It is reduce, reuse and recycle. Now, a circular economy which minimizes the generation of waste and encourages the use of products, materials and resources that will remain in the economy for as long as possible is essentially a sustainable economy. Food sustainability is also an integral part of promoting ecological practices and reducing, which also comes with reduction in consumption of meat and fish and avoiding consumption of processed food and reduction of waste. Now, when we talk about promoting ecological practices in industry and agriculture, it is about making our industries, farming and fishing more eco-friendly and being careful with how we use and consume food. First, it's about making our industries and farming in a way that they don't harm the environment. This includes using methods that are good for nature, the organic farming and sustainable fishing. Then there's a focus on food sustainability. That means making sure we can keep producing enough food for everyone without damaging the environment. We can do this by eating more fruits, vegetables and greens and cutting down on meat and dairy. Processed foods aren't great for the environment either, so it's good to avoid them when we can. Another important thing is reducing waste. We should only buy what we need and try to use things more than once if possible. This way, we are not throwing away as much stuff, which helps the environment. Overall, it's about being mindful of how we use our resources, how much we eat and make things so we can keep our planet healthy for the long run. Taxing fossil fuels and implementing carbon markets. Now, taxing the use of fossil fuels and establishing carbon markets create economic incentives for industries to reduce emissions and invest in cleaner technologies, fostering a transition towards a low carbon economy. What do we understand by taxing fossil fuels? So essentially it means imposing taxes on the use and production of fossil fuels. Governments can discourage their consumption and encourage investment in renewable energy alternatives. This helps internalize the environmental costs of fossil fuel use, incentivizing individuals and businesses to reduce their carbon emissions. Now, what do we mean by implementing carbon markets? It essentially means that we establish a cap on the total amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted by regulated entities. These entities are allocated or they have to purchase emission permits which can be traded on the market. Now this creates a financial incentive by reducing emissions, as companies can profit from selling their excess permits and adopt cleaner technologies to comply with regulations. So taxing fossil fuels and implementing carbon markets is about using money to encourage companies to be cleaner and use less stuff that hurts the environment. First, there's the idea, like we had discussed previously before, first there's the idea of taxing fossil fuels. Now what does this mean? This means making companies pay extra money if they use things like oil and coal. By doing this, the government hopes companies will use less of these bad for the planet fuels and instead invest in cleaner energy like solar or wind power. Then there's something called carbon markets. These are like trading cards, but for pollution. Companies are only allowed to make a certain amount of pollution, and if they make less, they can sell their pollution cards to other companies. This gives them a reason to pollute less and find cleaner ways to do business. So basically, by making it more expensive to be dirty and giving rewards for being clean, we are hoping to make the world a cleaner place for everyone. Now let's look at the adaptation strategies. Like we discussed, like we mentioned before, adaptation strategies is essentially when we are required to adjust to changes, and here the change is definitely climate change. Now climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies are crucial for minimizing the occurrence of hazards associated with climate change and ensuring the continued existence of life on Earth. Adaptation strategies, they help human and natural systems accommodate to changes. And the examples include the construction of high-rise buildings and living building elements, as well as recycling of urban waste. These strategies are important for addressing the impacts of climate change on ecological systems and human well-being. And they should be integrated with social considerations, such as political situations, cultural differences, and economic limitations. Now, when we talk about adaptation strategies, there are 5 adaptation strategies that we have shortlisted, and we'll begin with the first one, which is building safer and sustainable infrastructure. The second one is, of course, reforestation and ecosystem restoration. The third one is crop diversification, and then we move forward to innovative solutions for natural disaster management, and finally climate emergency action plans. So shall we begin with the first one? So the first one is building safer and sustainable infrastructure. What does this mean? It means building to withstand disasters by making sure buildings and roads are strong enough to handle things like earthquakes, floods, and big storms. We do this by using tough materials, making structures stronger, and adding safety features to keep people and buildings safe. Eco-friendly, being eco-friendly in construction. What does this mean? When we build stuff like roads and buildings, we want to use materials and methods that don't harm the environment. So we use things like renewable materials, ones that can be replaced easily. We're making sure buildings use energy wisely and use techniques that are good for the planet. Creating resilient transportation. This is about making sure our roads, bridges, and trains can handle extreme weather and don't hurt the environment too much. We encourage people to use green ways to get around, like walking, biking, or using electric cars. Adding nature to cities. We can only do that by bringing in more plants and green areas into our cities. This helps with things like soaking up the rainwater, keeping the air clean, and giving animals a place to live. It also cools things down in hot cities and saves energy by reducing the need for air conditioners. Using resources wisely. When we build stuff, we try not to waste things like water, energy, and materials. We recycle what we can, use technology to save resources, and try to keep costs down while helping the planet. The second one is reforestation and ecosystem restoration. Now, the loss of forest areas are caused by climate change and above all by the conversion of land for agriculture and livestock use, which threatens terrestrial biodiversity and survival of indigenous forestry and forest communities. Safeguarding the forest areas strengthens the management of natural resources such as planet's fresh water. 75% comes from these ecosystems and increases land yield. Replanting forests and restoring degraded ecosystems not only help in storing and converting carbon dioxide, but also enhances biodiversity. It improves water retention and reduces the vulnerability of communities to climate-related hazards. Crop diversification. So what do we mean by crop diversification? Diversifying crop varieties and agricultural practices increases resilience to changing climatic conditions, such as drought, floods, and temperature extremes, ensuring food security and livelihoods for communities dependent on agriculture. When farmers plant a variety of crops and use different ways of farming, it helps them deal with different kinds of weather, like too much or too little rain, or hot or cold temperatures. This helps make sure there's enough food for everyone and that farmers can keep making a living. The government actually plays a vital role by encouraging crop diversification by purchasing crops other than wheat and rice at fair prices. This encourages farmers to grow a wider range of foods, which is good for the land and for people's diet. For instance, if there's a farmer who grows rice, wheat, and legumes together in the same field, this isn't just good for having different kinds of food, it also makes the soil healthier and helps protect against problems like pests and diseases. It's a way of farming that keeps going strong over time without harming the environment. Now we come to innovative solutions for natural disaster management. Researching and developing innovative strategies and technologies for disaster prevention, like early warning systems, with the help of technologies like artificial intelligence and disaster response teams, improve preparedness and reduces the impacts of climate-related disasters on communities and infrastructures. This can be further achieved by encouraging community engagement and training them to respond to any form of disaster to maximize awareness and minimize damage. When people know what to do, disasters aren't as scary and they don't cause as much damage. Climate emergency action plans. What are climate emergency action plans? It is developing a comprehensive action plan for responding to climate emergencies, which ensures coordinated and effective responses to extreme weather events, heat waves, and other climate-related crises, safeguarding lives and livelihoods. It includes developing policies and regulations to support climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building efforts across all levels of government and sectors of society. We can also engage stakeholders. We can include communities, businesses, NGOs, and academia in the development and implementation of climate action plans to ensure broad support and participation. And finally, we can align climate emergency action plans with broader sustainable development objectives. What does this mean? It includes poverty alleviation, social equity, and environmental conservation. So essentially, when we make plans to deal with climate change, we also need to think about other important things, like making sure everyone has enough money to live, treating everyone fairly, and taking care of nature. It's about making our world better for everyone, not just dealing with one problem. So that essentially brings us to the end of this session. Now we'll do a quick recap of what was discussed in this session. We started off with mitigation strategies, which included improving energy efficiency and adopting renewable energy, promoting sustainable mobility, ecological practices in industry and agriculture, and taxing fossil fuels and carbon markets. Then we moved on to adaptation strategies, which spoke about building sustainable infrastructure, reforestation and ecosystem restoration, crop diversification, innovative solutions for natural disaster management, and climate emergency action plans. So with these combined, mitigation and adaptation measures form a holistic approach to addressing climate change, aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while building resilience to its impacts, ensuring a sustainable and secure future for all. Thank you very much.